A little girl named Victoria, also known as Tori, just 2 years old when she died. Now her birth parents are charged with her murder. She's also at the center of a controversy. Should children's courts send vulnerable kids like Tori back to their birth parents if there's a history of alleged abuse and neglect? That's in tonight's special edition of True Crime Stories. Good evening, everyone. I'm Gina Silva. Tori Sandoval is just one of the kids we've profiled. Kids who ended up lost in the system that was supposed to protect them. Before Tori died, before she was ordered by a court to live with her birth parents, critics say there were plenty of missed opportunities, including a dire warning from an expert on child placement. The history of the parents involves domestic violence, child abuse, sexual abuse charges, and a restraining order for physical abuse. Contas went on to say there are cases where common sense must prevail, but that warning was not heeded. Now, joining us as always is Robin Sachs, our Fox 11 legal analyst. Robin sat in on last week's preliminary hearing where a judge ordered Tori's birth parents to stand trial for murder. Now, you were there, you listened to the horrific accusations. How difficult was it for everyone to hear what happened to this baby?
Not only was it disgusting, despicable testimony. Not only am I a mom listening to this, but the most horrific part about this is that it was true. That this isn't something that I was watching on a movie, that this wasn't something that I read in a book. This was true, real-life, horrific actions by a biological parents to their biological daughter that could have been totally 100% prevented had the system worked.
And clearly it did not, because it had a lot of warnings about this.
Right, and we're going to talk about some of those warnings as we go on. And there were a number of opportunities to have gotten in the way and protected Tori.
All right, thank you, Robin. Now let's take a look at the preliminary hearing. Listen to some of the testimony inside a courtroom in Pomona. It includes a pathologist in the case, a homicide detective, even Tori's sister testifying against her own mother. All of it part of the prosecution's effort to lay out a murder case.
Matter of People versus Joseph Sandoval and Jennifer Dalhover.
The cause of death is blunt chest and abdominal trauma due to chronic child abuse/neglect.
Victoria had been in foster care from almost the day that she was born.
She was an amazing eater. She ate everything. It was a joke in our house that if we could find something that she didn't like to eat, because she loved everything. She would cry and cling to me and would not want to go into the visit, and she would be like having her hands on it's a glass room, so she would have her hands up crying because she didn't want to go.
At some point, did Victoria move out of your house?
Yes.
And do you know where she went from there?
She went to the shelter with her biological mom and dad.
The defendants here in court?
Yes, sir.
Did you notice anything that concerned you about Victoria?
She looked really skinny.
Victoria come and nug on me, like pulling on me, telling me she's hungry.
She told me that she wouldn't stop screaming. She was a spoiled brat, that she was evil. I suggested that she contact the social worker and relinquish Victoria back to the system.
And what was her response to you?
I'm never going to let them, referring to the Sedgwicks, have her.
He said that he was attempting to change her diaper. She fell over his right knee, and this caused her to strike her head. He told me generally that she falls a lot.
She had multiple bruises on the face and head. The liver had multiple lacerations with bleeding. She had 2 separate fractures on the lateral right 5th rib. She had 1 fracture in the lateral right 6th rib, and she had 2 separate healing fractures in the posterior right 8th ribs.
I've heard the arguments of all sides, and I do feel there is sufficient evidence produced at this hearing to hold both defendants to answer, and I will issue an order accordingly.
Joining us now are Kelly and Terry Sedgwick, who were Tori's foster parents before she was handed back to her birth parents. Kelly also testified at that hearing. Now, watching this video, both of you, it's incredibly difficult.
Yes, it is.
They're both tearing up right now, and it's, you know, a couple of years later here at the time of prosecution, yet you hear and have heard for the first time the coroner talk about the actual cause of death. How did you feel when you heard what the coroner said?
There are no words.
Shocking reality. We didn't know.
It's so the opposite of how her life was with us. It's just completely opposite.
Now, Tori was with you for 8 months. You wanted to adopt this baby. What happened? They just come to you and say, going back to the parent?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
We were willing to adopt. Reunification is always first, which I explained in my testimony. But if that fails, then we were, of course, willing to adopt her. And yes, it just went from they were looking at us to adopt her to, oh, well, now we're not going to anymore.
But in some ways, this has become a case about, you know, Jennifer Haldover, the mom, against you guys. And somewhere in the process, the birth parents forgot about the baby, forgot about Tori. And how is it that you were in court and not one time did the system say, hold it here, let's really look at the best interest of this child who's in danger?
I don't know. They didn't even bring up, I mean, I was at court when they relinquished her on September 1st back to Jennifer and Joseph, and they didn't even bring up Tori's name in the courtroom. Like, there was nothing. We didn't even, Linda and I, Contis, were both in the court at that time, and we didn't even realize that they were actually giving her back because they were talking about the older children, and we thought they were going to give it some more time, actually. And then we came out and they said, okay, she's going back today.
But you had both raised questions. You had both raised concern. This is a mother who has abused this child before.
Yeah, but the people who are supposed to speak for her, her social worker, her attorney, to Kelly's knowledge, sat there and said nothing.
Well, and let's go back a little bit here. Jennifer has a ton of kids. I mean, in some ways, a litter
11.
of children, 11 children.
Right.
And just refresh my recollection, how many of them at the time that Tori was placed back were living with Jennifer?
Only the new baby. Yeah. The baby that she had after, because Tori was a baby when she was taken. They were all taken because of domestic violence. And so Tori was only 4 days old, so she never lived with Jennifer or Joseph ever. So once the baby after her was born and they disappeared and then they found them in the shelter, then all of a sudden the baby was healthy, so we were going to return Victoria too.
See, what doesn't make any sense to me, and you can probably explain this, why she's homeless, she hasn't taken any classes as to, I'm going to fix my anger problems, I'm not going to abuse children. Why do they send the kids back without any proof that this person has changed?
That's a good question. Why is they're living in a homeless shelter? They're not supporting themselves. I mean, where does the parenting side of this come into play? Saying that the baby's healthy, therefore give the baby back? Well, those are questions we have.
That's one of the big problems. The mandate of the dependency court, where Department of Children and Family Services, where this stuff happens, is family reunification. And there is this philosophy there that blood is thicker than water. But at some point, when you have a case where you have 11 total children, and you have documented abuse, documented sexual abuse, documented physical abuse, documented neglect, documented homelessness. At some point you say, okay, yes, we'd like this family to be together, but it's just not a good decision.
And what is it that you've got to be blaming someone? And it's not just the mother.
Well, I mean, Jennifer and Joseph, she died at their hands. They were the ones, they were her parents, they were the one taking care of her, they were the ones she was living with. However, I do feel that there's many people that did not do their jobs, but Tori's not the only. That's why I don't want people just to go, oh, that's a really sad story, I can't even listen to that, because I agree, but this happens all the time.
It does. It really does. And to the Sedgwick's credit, what they really want to and have been helping hold the parents responsible, because you have to hold everyone responsible. And the reality is, it was Jennifer and Joseph that did the act that caused Tori's life to end. It would be nice that our system worked to not let that happen, but at the end of the day, they're the ones who are responsible.
Absolutely.
We don't want this to be yesterday's news. We believe we want Tori's life to speak on and on and on, and that's why we set up her foundation.
Their
Thank you so
foundation
much.
is toristorch.org. I just want to make
And
sure
we're
we
going to
get
have that on our website. Thank you so much. Well, still ahead on True Crime Stories, a teenager who had to go into court and testify against her own mother. We're going to talk to her here in the studio coming up next.
Go first, and then the